Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of You Gotta Read This. This is Sarah Lucas. If you like what you see here, you're welcome to follow me on BiblioCommons by searching user ndpl_Sarah L. In this episode, the books that I discuss are those that I intend to use for my inquiry project. They are all on the topic of tough topics that my young patrons may face, trauma, or overcoming adversity. The first book I want to talk about is Wish Tree by Katherine Applegate. As I mentioned in my previous video, Katherine Applegate is one of my favorite children's authors, and all of her books that I've read so far are wonderful. She has a way of making simple language meaningful and tough topics accessible to a range of audiences. Wish Tree is special in that the narrator is an old red oak tree. Just like Ivan in The One and Only Ivan, Red the Oak observes all the nuances of human nature, both good and the terrible, and touches characters' lives in a profound way. Red sees a new family in the neighborhood harassed by a mysterious teen and works with their residents, or the dynamic families of animals living in their hollows, to do something about the hate that begins to spread. It's a lovely story about kindness, respecting nature, and the value of community that would be perfect for middle grades, specifically ages 8 to 12. It's published by Fievel and Friends, and it was published in 2017. And I rated this 5 stars. I found it pretty perfect. Book 2 is called Winter Girls, and it's by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is an example of young adult fiction, and I said I'd recommend it for ages 13 and over. I read Laurie Halse Anderson Speak back in high school, and I've been hesitant to pick up her books ever since because I know how emotionally challenging they tend to be. However, I wanted to find examples of youth literature that dealt with common traumatic issues that teens face in hopes to offer support. This book is told from the perspective of an older teen working through the guilt she feels after her best friend dies as a result of bulimia. In my opinion, this book walks a very fine line between being helpful and being a trigger. Leah, the main character, suffers from anorexia and describes in great detail the ways in which she conceals the truth of her condition, lies to her family, and mutilates her body. Anderson has the best intentions, which she explains in the acknowledgments at the end, but I don't think I'd recommend this to a teen experiencing trauma. I looked up on Common Sense Media as well as Goodreads some reviews, and it received very mixed reviews that really vary from grateful survivors of anorexia and bulimia to enraged parents that really don't want their teens or tweens reading a book like this for fear that they may get some ideas. I gave this 2 stars. I did not like it very much, and I'd be a little bit nervous, to be honest, to give this to a patron. My third book is called ID, Stuff That Happens to Define Us, and it is edited or written by Kate Scowen and illustrated by Peter Mitchell. This is a young adult illustrated poetry book, and I recommend this for ages 13 and over, maybe even as young as 12. And this was published in 2010, so this is one of my older selections. This is a book I just happened to pick up as I was working on some shelving, and I thought it would be relevant to my inquiry project. It is a short collection of true stories the author collected from friends and through flyers posted at community and youth centers. They are all events that have had a direct impact on each storyteller's life. For example, one of the stories tells about a boy who gets punched by his father at the dinner table, and that one punch triggers an epiphany in the storyteller's life. And he's inspired to work hard to be nothing like his violent father. And at the end of each story, There's a quick Q&A with a storyteller that elaborates on how they overcame that particular situation and how it affects the person they are currently. So it ranges from things like abuse from a parent, sexual identity, and escaping a violent household. So we've got a range of things that teens might deal with, or my young painters might deal with. And this is definitely a safe recommendation for teens going through tough issues because it provides honest and not pandering support. So it doesn't romanticize a life of abuse or trauma. It offers help and ways to overcome these things and to be a good person and lead a meaningful life despite that. And my favorite part about this book is that there's even a list of helpful hotlines and resources at the very end, so websites and phone numbers, just in case a teen might need some additional help. I gave this 5 stars just for the amount of help that it offers. It's an extension beyond just reading short stories. It's a sort of an area of support, a resource for support for teens. I'm really excited to talk about this next book, my 4th book. This one's called Burn Baby Burn, and it's by Meg Medina. This is teen fiction, and I'd recommend this for ages 14 and over, and it was published in 2018. I'm excited about this because Meg Medina is visiting Central Library, where I work, this week, and I had the responsibility of planning activities for the teens that would be attending this author talk. So I had to read it really fast, and I read it during my downtime at work, and I'm so glad that I did. It takes place in New York City during the summer of 1977, and this happens to be a very tumultuous time in U.S. history, specifically in New York City. Women were fighting for equality and reproductive rights. The city was nearly bankrupt, and citizens were skeptical of authority, especially police officers and firemen. Disco was really hot, and punk music was just starting to become on the rise. And the serial killer Son of Sam was causing panic on top of all of that. And the climax of this story is when, in 1977, in that summer, New York experiences a major blackout that shuts down the entire city. And this story follows Nora Lopez, and she's a senior in high school, and she deals with all of the normal teen things like dating. Her parents are divorced, and unfortunately, she has a pretty serious issue at home. On top of all of the stuff going on in the city, her little brother is extremely violent towards her and her mother, and she's dealing with repressing that and keeping that a secret from her friends. Medina does a wonderful job of creating a strong, smart, and resilient Latina main character, and I definitely recommend this to teen readers struggling through adversity while trying to establish a good foundation for a successful future. It does have a very happy ending, I'm happy to say. I don't want to spoil anything, but you should still read it. I gave it 5 stars, and I think this is going to get a lot of recognition in the next couple of years. The final book I'm going to talk about today is called What I Leave Behind, and it's by Allison McGee. This is teen fiction, and I recommend it for ages 13 and over, probably a mature 13-year-old and older. This was published in 2018. I decided to read this book after reading an article on Booklist, actually recommended by Kim Kramer, and the article's called Walk On, Trauma and Healing in Young Adult Fiction. What I Leave Behind is a story told in short vignettes about Will, a teenage boy who works at a dollar store, and his journey to understanding his father's unexpected suicide and the gang rape of his childhood friend. He copes with these things by walking all over his city and observing a few secondary characters and bringing them gifts he bought from the dollar store. The overall theme seems to be that kindness is the best medicine for hardship. He Will, the main character, is an amazing role model for teens, and I'd be glad to hand this to anyone, especially teen boys that may be reluctant to read. It's short, yet it's very meaningful and positive. Really positive messages. I gave this one 5 stars. I think it's I think it's lovely, and again, this is another one that I see is going to get a lot of recognition soon. And that leaves me with the books I plan to read next, the books I have on deck. The first book here is Tess of the Road, and this was also in that book list article about books about trauma for young adults, young adult fiction and trauma. It's by Rachel Hartman. This seems to be a fantasy. I'm usually a huge fan of fantasy, so I'm excited about getting started with this. The next book is called Just Under the Stars. I don't know much about it, but I think it touches on homelessness, the issue of homelessness. I could be wrong. I've read so many books about that recently. I tend to get them mixed up. But Just Under the Stars, and this one's by Melissa Sarno, and this is children's fiction. And then the third one I hope to finish is called Wolf Hollow. I'm sure y'all have heard of this one before. I've not read it. It's gotten a lot of recognition by Laura Wolk. This is one that's been on my to-read list for a long, long time, and I'm finally getting to it, so I'm looking forward to that. I hope you enjoyed my book list today, and happy reading.